World Financial Group offers entrepreneurs from all backgrounds the opportunity to start their own business on a level playing field. Dr. Yana Woodhouse, receiving the WCM Wall Street Pioneer Award by the United Black Wall Street of America, Inc., is one of those entrepreneurs.
I see WFG and TFA as a place where African Americans with an entrepreneurial mindset can flourish. And the bonus, we help families and serve the communities across the country.
To learn more about us, go to worldfinancialgroup.com.
We are the sons and daughters of the soul. We are resilient and forever forward-thinking. We ask for nothing else than the opportunity to live and to create the lives that we were meant to live. We want nothing but an equal chance at options and possibilities. The same possibilities and options to live out our potential as our fellow man. We want to be heard, understood, and expressive in our reality. We are the future. We are the creative. We are here.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
Good afternoon. This is Tony Rogers, your host for Urbanology, the Art of War. I hope you all are doing well. Depending on where you are, it could be either very warm or very cold. That's the wonders of our new virtual age. But wherever you are, happy Lunar New Year. Year of the Tiger. I hope those who understand and celebrate the Lunar New Year as we celebrate our regular New Year are doing well. It's an interesting time. 2022 is supposed to be a very enlightening year. Every year is enlightening, but by the way we had to pivot for the last 2 years, I think that we will probably never really go back to how things were, which I suppose has its yin and yang connected to it. There's some good and there are some memories that we will miss. Even now, just being able to reach out and touch someone is not as easy as we would like it to be. Matter of fact, speaking of which, my guest for this show today is a person that I really haven't seen in almost 2 years. And we were close. We worked together. We trained together. But the pandemic or the pandemic, depending on how you want to look at it, has separated people in a way that is that never had been experienced before. However, the virtual reality of this whole concept of Zoom and other programs such as Soul City has brought people together in a way that they've never been put together again. So we have the best of times and the worst of times again. But I would like for you to give a warm welcome to a very good friend, a beautiful soul spirit, um, and the director of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, Tracy Hyter-Suffern. How are
It's a
you doing,
mouthful,
Tracy?
right? Hi, Tony.
Again, I was, it's hard to believe that it's almost been 2 years since we have not seen each other.
It has been next month. Will be 2 years since we shut down the museum. We thought we were leaving for a couple of weeks, and 2 years later, we're still figuring it out, right? So, yeah, I was listening to your intro and thinking one of the things I miss most about being in Harlem every single day, because I work mostly remotely these days. I go to the museum as needed. But one of the things I missed most was what I considered to be the longest part of a very long commute. As you know, my commute to the museum every day was very long. But once I exited the train at 125th Street, I was navigating the walk from 125th to 129th Street, where the museum is, and it would take forever. And even though physically it was the shortest part, emotionally and from the heart, it was the longest part, because I couldn't walk those 4 blocks without stopping to talk with people, hug people, ask people how they were doing. And so I miss that very, very much. I miss the touching and the love, the daily doses of love on the way to the museum from the subway station every time I left the station.
Well, I'm sure that so many people have done that. Um, and I'm included in this study, that a lot of people have suffered from depression based
Mm,
on that, especially
mm,
when it gets cold. I mean, when it's warm and you could go out and you can do
right.
things, even when we were locked down, at least you could kind of go out and sit in the park or do something. But when there's a study that shows that when uh, the sun goes down, especially in the winter months, people become more depressed. The
Mhm.
more sun, the happier we are.
Right. That's right. You need vitamin D and you need sunlight. Yeah.
Right. And
As much as you need connection and physical contact. That's true. Yeah.
so, but these are the things that we learn to appreciate sometimes, even more so.
That's right.
And I'm sure that we
Yeah.
we we will do that. And you're a traveler, so I know that's the other thing of being able to just kind of jump on a plane when we can and go to some place without feeling, that there may be something that we
There's some
will bring to it, or it will
right,
bring
some
to
added
us.
risk. I think it will be a long time before, or if ever, that we'll feel the ease in traveling that we used to feel. I am beginning to travel again a little bit this month. I've got 2 trips coming up, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I have traveled a tiny bit during the pandemic, but each time, it's a very different experience with canceled flights and
Yeah,
COVID testing and sitting next to strangers on the train. I mean, on the plane, it's a very different experience now.
especially in the planes, such a closed situation.
That's
But
right.
nevertheless, we're working on a plan to go to Senegal, which is going to be an interesting situation. But let's talk about the Jazz Museum. A lot of people
Okay.
still may not know that Harlem has a treasure on 129th Street.
That's right.
Please, for those who do not know, give a little bit of history and understanding of what
Okay.
the treasure is on 129th.
I will begin by saying Harlem has many treasures,
Of
of
course.
which is obvious, but I just want to make sure everybody listening knows that Harlem has many treasures, of which the National Jazz Museum in Harlem is one. We are located on 129th Street near Malcolm X Boulevard, where we have been physically located for the past 6 years. We've been in Harlem. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary. So we have been uh, an integral part of the cultural community of Harlem for a quarter of a decade now. I have been with the museum. I just had my 4-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And because of people like you, because of the people I was describing on my daily walk from the subway to the museum, it seems like much longer. For anyone who and I mean that in the most positive possible way, because the sense of community and the sense of belonging to a place and the sense of being recognized, and I don't necessarily mean being recognized as Tracy, who's the director of the museum, but just being recognized as part of the community, is something that I'm sure that there are many other places on the planet who experience something similar. It is something, there's an extra added spice to being a part of that kind of community in Harlem.
Yes, it is. But then, Harlem is a state of mind too.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
it's as you say, I'm sure wherever people are, they have similar types of thoughts. It's just that the rich history and there's something magical about the village of Harlem, and it always been that way. Um, I know the spirits and the ancestors, and you know about that based on some of your heritage
That's
and
true.
upbringing. That there's a lot that's there as it relates to our spirits and ancestors that still, certain grounds, sacred grounds,
That's right.
and the like that. Even now, science is beginning to say, there may be something with that, maybe that vibrations or something that's connected to that. But
We knew it long before science figured it out, though.
but one of the things that I know, and we'll talk about the history, but just as by experience, is when I walk into the museum, you could feel. Obviously there are different things there. There are different artifacts that carry that energy and that frequency of those who played the piano and wore some of the clothes or the things that are there. Those great individuals that influenced the world. But there's just an energy, and I have to say, the 4 years that you were there, Tracy, you really, really enhanced that feeling, that professionalism that brought those things that we all cherish
Thank you.
into another type of understanding
Thank you.
and catering.
I accept that as the highest compliment, Tony. Thank you. And, it ties directly back to what you were saying a moment ago about ancestors and upbringing. I've been giving this a lot of thought lately, and I was having a conversation about this with one of the trustees of the museum. I grew up, as did many of us, in the era, what I call the era of the community center, right? So I'm from New York City, as you know. I'm not from Harlem. I have lived in Harlem, but I am from New York City, even though it's the most remote part of New York City, here in Staten Island, where I am now.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
I say it all the time. I just get it out of the way so that people can laugh at it. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about what that has meant in terms of my contribution to the museum while I have been its servant leader, right? So what that means is I grew up in the 70s where there really was a mindset about gathering in spaces, gathering in community spaces. So I grew up in a neighborhood that had a community center, and you went to the community center to do things and to learn things. I had my very first job at 14 years old in the community center in my neighborhood. And so without even realizing it, that mentality has carried through into my adulthood. And so when I came to the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, one of the charges from one of our board members was to make the museum a part of the community where people were welcome and they felt that they could walk in and out. And because I had that background in what it meant to belong to a community center, it was just a very natural progression for me. I would literally walk down the street and say, you know, it's hot outside and we have air conditioning and we have a couch and we have jazz and we can give you food. So come in and hang out. I would literally invite strangers into the museum to just come and hang out and be. The museum is about 1,800 square feet, which means that you can see the physical exhibits in the museum. And I'll talk about how we're changing in a minute. But you can see the physical exhibits housed in the museum in about an hour. But the reason, or I should say, and the reason to come back is not just the exhibits on the walls and the kiosks that you can play with, but what you're talking about in terms of the energy. There are performances, there are people who come in and out just to hang out. There's a welcoming energy that is sometimes challenging. We talk about not just jazz, but we talk about the culture that jazz helped create. So we talk about social movements, we talk about spirituality, we talk about healing. You can walk into the National Jazz Museum at any given moment and really be engaged in that kind of conversation, or just that be an observer of those kinds of conversations with people from around the world. People from other parts of the world visit the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, not only because of who we are, but because of where we're located. We're deep in the heart of Central Harlem.
That's true. And tell us a little bit about what one would see when they walk into the Jazz Museum of Harlem.
So
I love these stories.
Okay. Well, you know what? The answer is going to be different now because of what we're doing. Yeah. So the front part of the museum is still what you recognize. One of our prized possessions is one of Duke Ellington's pianos. We have one of his baby grands. As soon as you walk into the museum, Duke Ellington's piano greets you at the front door. It's the piano that was housed in his sister's house and the piano on which he would compose when he came back to Harlem. And when he passed away, it was the piano that his family held on to and offered to the museum as a long-term loan. With the proviso, with two provisos. One is that we take good care of it, which we have, and we're very proud of that. The other is that it be played. So we make sure to invite Harlem artists to come into the piano and play it, to invoke the spirit of Duke Ellington and fill the museum with that kind of creativity. There's one of my colleagues once said to me that when you offer humanity, and I have revised that to say, when you understand the power of creativity, it leaves residual, right? And it leaves behind the residual of humanity, the residual of creativity. So when we invite people to come on in and play the piano for our audiences, for our members, that residual is left behind. And that's the spirit that you were talking about. That's what you feel in the museum. On the, let's say the north side of that piano is a replica of what a Harlem museum would have looked like during the Harlem Renaissance. So there's a player piano, there's a Victrola, and they're both working. The Victrola works. We love it when the kids come into the museum and have no idea what this machine is. And we put a 78 on the Victrola and we play it. So that's the part of the museum that you remember and what you will still see when you walk into the museum. What's different is we have undertaken our very first ever in the history of the museum collaboration with Disney to celebrate the movie Soul, which came out in 2020. It was a Pixar animated movie that celebrated Joe Gardner, who was the main character of that movie, piano player, music teacher, and jazz musician. What a lot of people may not know is that his piano playing was actually an animation of one of our artistic directors, John Batiste, who has been the artistic director for the museum for years, with Christian McBride, who was our first artistic director and continues to be one of our two directors there at the museum. So Disney approached us and asked us if we would like to mount an exhibit of that movie, of that animated movie. It has visited New Orleans, it has visited Kansas City, and they asked us if we'd like to be next, and we couldn't believe it and said yes. And then months into the planning, they asked us, listen, we have an idea. What if instead of just mounting an exhibit, we turned the entire museum into the Half Note Club?
Wow.
Yeah, which is featured in the movie and which was a real club that existed. And so we said yes. And so crazy people said yes. And what's happening right now is that almost the entire exhibits almost all of them have been dismantled, except for those two pieces that I just talked about, the Duke Ellington piano and the replica of the living room. And what will be mounted in the next week is the Half Note Club that we will invite everyone into. And the launch of that exhibit is on February 10th. So that's when we're having our big media launch event. And then from February 11th through August 31st, anyone who comes into the museum will walk into the Half Note Club.
Wow, that is amazing. Matter of fact, a neighbor, Craig Harris, the trombonist, he was part of the music in soul. He, during the pandemic, Craig went into the house and he worked with a team on two projects, Soul and the Black Panther movie about Fred Hampton.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He
Oh wow. Okay.
He did all of that with that. Matter of fact, I'm talking to Craig. He may be going to synagogue with us to start looking at the jazz museum, which may be a connection there. The Senegalese Jazz Festival in June. And when he told me he did the music, I watched, Jonah. I think what was it? What was the name of it? Jonah, I believe, the Fred Hampton movie that was recently came out.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, just to hear the music again, since I said, and his credits are there. He said,
well, we have to get him
on computer.
Okay.
And all of the musicians, really? Okay. All of the musicians were in different locations, and they arranged the music and all of that stuff based on using Zoom and
wow, like it's been a real challenge, right? Well,
but that's good. But what about all of that precious?
All the artifacts.
The artifacts.
We still have them.
Okay, because
they're going to storage temporarily through the end of the Disney exhibit, and then starting in September, we will decide whether to remount the exhibits and have the return the museum to the state it was, or whether to mount a new exhibit. But no matter what, as you've just said, that's precious cargo.
It sure is.
Yeah, we will take very good care of it.
There was some just pictures that you were right there with the artists, and just about everyone. And it was, they had like the Stevie Wonder. I mean, it had music. It's
Right.
not just famous jazz artists, but photos of a number of different well-known musicians in many
Mhm.
different areas of music, which is what was also great about the museum. You used to have the jam sessions, and then you
Right.
have
Right.
gospel and Latin and
Everything. Yeah.
all the
The
things
roots
there.
the roots of jazz, and jazz as the roots of the music that came after. Well, let me say this about that. Since during the pandemic, of course, just like a lot of like every museum, we were closed, right? We were closed to the public, but what that the physical space was closed. But what that meant was we put everything online. So all of our performances, our exhibits, our discussions, our workshops, every single thing that we were doing inside the museum, we put online, and it was all offered free of charge.
Hmm.
And what that has meant for the museum is our audience has grown to include a global audience. We've
Yeah.
increased our audience by almost 700%. And we now can be seen. Our what we do is now seen all over the world. And while we had a plan to do that before the pandemic, what the pandemic did was force us to move quickly. We reopened the museum on July 8th, and we opened it to a limited schedule by reservation so that
Mhm.
we could maintain physical distancing.
Mhm.
And we were open according to that schedule um, until the beginning of January.
Right.
So two things happened. One is Omicron, and two is this exhibit from Disney. So we reclosed the museum in the beginning of January, around January 10th, I think it was. And we will reopen on February to the public. We will reopen
Right.
on February 11th. So we will reopen to that abbreviated schedule, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 12 to 5. The difference will be that we will continue to broadcast almost everything online. And slowly but surely, we are reincorporating all those things that you were talking about, the jam sessions and the
Mhm.
live performances, which we had started to do anyway. The difference was that we weren't doing it to a live audience
Right.
because the museum it's 1,800 square feet. It's like a big Harlem living room, right? Which is one of the things I love most about it. But we really do have to make sure people are safe. So when we reopen, we will welcome anybody who wants to come in with proof of vaccination and with a mask, with an
Mhm.
appropriate mask. And if you don't have a mask, we'll give you a mask. That's not an issue. But everyone must be, it's a requirement to come back into the museum. But we will reopen to great fanfare
Mhm.
on February 11th.
Have to put that have to put that date, and I have to send my I have a new address, so I have to make sure that. But you still have my email
That's right. But you have to
that I give
update.
you because that's
Yeah.
going to be. We have to talk with Matt. Maybe we can do some broadcasting there as the channel as the Soul City starts to grow. It would be
Mhm.
great to have some of the sessions on demand. That could be another fundraising opportunity
Mhm. That would be wonderful.
because one of the other things about the jam sessions at the National Jazz Museum of Harlem, you never knew. Well, so many. I was just talking about Craig Harris. There's so many Harlemites who
That's right.
are quote unquote famous in
That's
in
right.
in the in the, in the area of music that someone you're walking by and no telling who's going to be coming in playing the drums or piano or sitting in, and of course Christian McBride, who is the god of the bass.
Right.
He did his
His radio show, his
his
series,
radio
The
show there
Lowdown,
live.
Conversations with Christian. That's
Yeah,
right.
you
So
know.
we are looking forward to that. And I will, back to those jam sessions. We are bringing them back again, slowly but surely. We had the tragic loss of David Dura, who
Yeah.
led our jam sessions for since before I came to the museum. For 5 or 6 years, he was leading those jam sessions, and now we're reconstituting them based on that loss, based on the pandemic, based on keeping people safe. So they're coming back. So everybody just hang on. They are coming back. And I will say this, I will amen what you said, Tony. And that is, I remember the first time I walked into one of those jam sessions, right? I didn't know what to expect. I just thought I was walking into the usual, right? An event at the museum with a very sedate, very quiet kind of audience. I walked into one of the best parties I have ever been in my life. That included kids from 3 or 4 years old, entire families, famous musicians I'd never heard of, students from music schools. It was a party, and that party was replicated once a month in the museum at every single family jam session. So we actually had 2 different jam sessions. We had the intergenerational jam session and the family jam session. And both of them were the biggest party. It seemed like almost like an impromptu thing. And in many ways it was whoever comes is who's here, right? So it was always that, led by, in case of the family jam session, David Dura. But because people knew, it was a part of Harlem. It became a Harlem institution, and people showed up from all over the city and Harlem.
And they, one of the interesting stories Ron Carter, who was at City College for a period of time as a professor, but we talk about gods. Ron Carter and Kristen McBride, that was part of a jam session, and it was interesting because there was a elderly couple. They were white, and they seemed a little nervous. And I was watching them because they were kind of frigidly, and I was wondering, do they feel that they're not safe? What is it? And then the rest of their family came in, and one of them was a young guy who played the trumpet. It was a kid. So these were grandparents, and their brother, their son had his son who was into music, and they were nervous because he was going to do a jam set. I think he must have been about 13, 14 with these
these legends, right?
And he did, and then after it, they were all happy.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting to see that the chemistry of how music just is that great ambassador where people will come in and be able to sit with the masters and play, and it just was a wonderful thing. And there's so many of those experiences, but being live must, I think that you're right, since the space was so, it was so great that it was that way because it just made you feel like you were at someone's home. But being able to do that virtually, it's a wonderful way to get so many more people involved.
That's right.
Especially, outside of the U.S.
And when we come back, we're figuring out, whatever we're figuring out, we are coming back, and we will do a combination of those jam sessions in person and while streaming them. So they will be streamed either live or recorded. That's the piece that we're figuring out. But it's that. I could not have offered a better description of who we are at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem than you just did. I've had there have been so many, but 2 moments that you just reminded me of at the museum. One was that moment when Christian brought in Ron Carter to do his radio interview, I couldn't believe my eyes that here's Ron Carter and Christian McBride
Yeah.
at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem in this tiny little space. It was one of those moments where I really was so thrilled to be the executive director of this place, because it meant that I got to take a couple of privileges. The other one that comes to mind immediately is when Christian brought John Patitucci, another bass god, right, into the museum, and I could barely speak. I was just you're in the presence of greatness in this tiny little space, and it's not about worship.
Right.
It is about that residue that I was talking about. You're in the presence of people who either helped create or transform the genre, who are just real people, and they're right here. And because the
Like
space is,
and Valerie Simpson was another great.
Valerie Simpson, Sheila E., Arturo O'Farrell. One of my favorites and that I like to talk about is what Melvis Santa, who is a Cuban pianist, educator, rumbera. She gave a workshop on the clave for in August, we celebrate the Afro-Latin roots of jazz. And Melvis Santa gave a workshop, and she was teaching, it was a packed house, and she was teaching the people in the room about the different claves. So she's teaching rhythm. And, you know, some of us can be real arrogant around, I got a lot of rhythm. What are you going to teach me about rhythm? But I have never had so much fun in my life when I couldn't keep up with a class. The audience was laughing. Some people could keep up, some people couldn't, and it didn't matter. But once again, Melvis is from these highly esteemed musicians in Cuba who was here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem teaching us how to feel the clave and how to move our bodies differently. And so it was music, but the immersion was different. It wasn't just talking. It was everybody get up. We're going to move our bodies. We're going to figure out how to do this together. And it was people from all over Harlem, people from all over the city. And it really is just, it epitomizes what the museum is about. And I want to be sure to let everybody know exactly where we are, because I haven't said that yet. We are located at 58 West 129th Street. We're about 75 feet from the corner of Malcolm X Boulevard. The easiest way to get there is to take the 2 or 3 train to 125th and take that walk that I was talking about, where you get to see what Harlem really is about. Walk 4 blocks north to 129th Street, make a right, and we are literally right there.
And if you see across the street Jacob's Restaurant, you know that you're in the right.
That's right. You know you're in the right spot. Or the Pioneer supermarket, where it's diagonally across the street. You know that you're on the right street. Now,
that's something that is going to be an interesting experience with the new decorations. Will you still be able to fit as many people? I mean, I know it was always kind of closed, but is it set up? How is it set up? Is it a club?
You and I will probably find out together if you if you accept our invitation to come on the 10th. But the less irreverent answer to that question is, we will always, until the world changes again in the direction of allowing people to be closer together, we will always observe COVID protocols. And part of the restrictions that we've been observing is that the reason we have timed reserved visits is so that we can help keep people safer, right? So before the pandemic, our standing room capacity was 80 for events. Our seated capacity was 60. We have reduced, even before the Disney exhibit, we reduced that capacity to 25 people at a time, because that is what we figured. That's the number of people that will allow us to keep physically distant, that 6-foot physical distance from each other. So we will continue to do that until it's safe to go back in the water, so that won't be a concern with the exhibit.
So how are you going to do that on the 10th? Because everybody and their mother is going to want to
Well, it's been interesting. We invited, I'm not going to tell you exactly how many, but let's say hundreds of people to come. And again, we're doing that, what I'm calling is rolling visits. So we're limiting the number of people who can come in at a time. And what we're saying to people is click here to our guest list and then pick the time that you'll be able to come. So we've got it worked out. We figured out how to, but we're getting, a lot of people are still very concerned. It doesn't matter how many hundreds we invited. It matters how many people say they're coming.
Well, I'm going to RSVP, and you can put me wherever you let me be, and just tell me when I'm supposed to show up.
Well, I will tell you this, that the morning portion is going to be one thing. That's sort of the business portion with the media and elected officials. This is a really big deal. And performers. The afternoon portion from 12 to 5 is going to be filled with surprises, including performances, invited guests.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having about 6 or 7 cakes made. If you remember the carrot cake, I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I do remember the carrot cake.
I'm bringing it back. I'm not making it just for everybody who's listening. You don't want to eat any cake I make, but the person who made that cake, I'm going to reach out to her this afternoon. Mm-hmm. She makes a killer red velvet rum cake that I'm going to bring. So, well,
I have to let Craig Harris know. I'm not sure that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I have to let him know.
I don't know if I have. I'll let Ryan Maloney as our program
I'll make sure
director.
that I send you his information.
Please do that. Ryan may have his contact information, but just in case, I'd love for him to be there on the 10th.
Yeah, because he definitely, he was part of the music for Soul. But yeah, so you tell me where, I'll follow your lead.
Okay. All right.
Just so that I could just see it. It doesn't, make any difference. Even
part
though
of history, it's the first
I could be
ever
pressed too, the community news and Harlem.
That's right. That's right. And on our side, the person handling PR for us is somebody it's Marco Noble.
Yes, I know. That's how he Marco said, Tony, this is happening. He sent me an email, which is why we were going to talk anyway, but then I said, well, I definitely need to call her now.
Right. Yeah. So for people who are not understanding one small part of what's going on here, here's the thing. Like, I make fun of my growing up in Staten Island because it was very rural, very parochial, very insular. As urban as Harlem is, it's very much the same way. Everybody knows everybody. So all you have to do is mention someone's first name and they're connected to somebody. You might think that you don't know, but that's because you're new, not because everybody else is new. Before we go, though, I do want to, we've spent a lot of time talking about Disney. I do want to let people know that we've got so much other stuff going on. We're working to create, and we've been doing this since last year, thanks to the New York City Council Coalition of Theaters of Color and some other funders. We've been creating digital experiences. In the past, we had school children coming to us, students coming to us. Mm-hmm. We have figured out how to get into the schools when they will let us. So we're bringing live performances and jazz education from the museum into schools all around New York City. We're now digitizing those experiences so that we can get them out to the world. We've got world-class musicians going into the schools to offer education about jazz and about Harlem. We're working on a self-guided app that will take you around Harlem to visit jazz spots that exist and jazz spots that no longer exist. And that includes people's homes. And it's just in the concept stage now, but we're working on that. We're still doing live performances at the museum. We're not doing it to an audience, but we are still offering live performances, and everything we do, every single thing we do is offered online free to the public now. And we're so deeply grateful to our funders who are allowing us to do this.
One of the things also that we have mentioned, and we'll talk about how people can get involved before we leave, but the Jazz Museum in Harlem is a not-for-profit, and one of the things that's very important is support. And it could be $5, it could be $5 million, it could be whatever, But in order to do these things, and most of this stuff is free. When
These
we're
days,
talking
all
about
of it is free.
the
Mhm.
jam sessions and all of those things, it's free, but it's based on the donations that people can make.
That's right.
And I think it's very important that, and if they go to the website, they can find out
There are
how.
two ways. One is go to jmih.org. And thank you, Matt, for putting the website up. And it'll take you to our homepage, and there's a donate button there. Or you can reach us in two ways by email. One is the email address that I think I gave a few minutes ago. There it is, tracy@jmih.org. Or you can reach out to us at info@jmih.org. So there are several ways to get in touch with us. If you call us, somebody will pick up the phone or somebody will get back to you. And we'd like to see you. We'd love, thank you for in advance for contributing to us. It's because of people like you that we can exist and that we can spread the good news of jazz these days all around the world, certainly all around Harlem. We're bringing it to your home now. You click on one of our performances and you have jazz in your home, but our existence depends on the kindness of people who donate to our organization.
And it's something, again, American classical music. This is we say jazz, even though a number of jazz artists, I think it was in one of the exhibits that you had I forgot who said it. Said, I don't want to be labeled into jazz because it's music.
That's Duke Ellington. He said there's only two kinds of music,
Right.
Good music and bad music, right? So he didn't want to be categorized. He said, and good music, and I don't want to misquote him, but good music takes you beyond category. It cannot be categorized. You can find that quote on YouTube, by the way. Just Google Duke Ellington Beyond Category, and you see the original interview of him by a journalist in black and white.
Right.
But yeah, and we believe that, and we're always making connections. If you think you don't like jazz, it's just because you don't know that you like jazz because you're listening to it all the time. If you listen to hip hop, if you listen to R&B, if you listen to gospel, you're seeing
If you
music
listen to classical music.
Classical music, you're listening to music that has either influenced jazz or been influenced by jazz. So you like it, you just don't know what you're listening to yet.
Right.
So come to us and we'll show you.
Speaking of which, again, Craig Harris, who is a great neighbor, a great guy, he did a free concert of strings in Metropolitan Church. It was such a beautiful. I posted it. I still have some of it on my phone. I still have some of the things that I experienced at the museum on my phone that I kind of play back every so often. But again, it's either good music or bad music.
Or bad. Only two kinds. That's it. If it stirs your heart
in any kind of way,
or it makes you want to tap your feet or nod your head, it's good music. If you are enraptured, it's good music. No judgments.
So that's going to be a big thing with Disney. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That is an interesting piece. We have to make sure that we connect. Our tourism board site is under construction, but that should be done by February, so we can transfer a lot of the stuff that you're doing on the tourism, because that would be a wonderful way for people to stop in and to see things who are coming in. The other thing is, at some point, I think you and Matt and I should talk to see how Soul City can again be involved. We were able to do a lot of filming there when during the pandemic, when you were closed.
That's true. That's right.
Around Harlem
Right.
Week, we were able to do some things there.
Yeah.
But the thought pattern is to have the opportunity to look at some of the programming
Mhm.
And I'm just looking at the fundraising part of it. There's so many wonderful ways that on demand we could create situations where many of the artists in support of the museum would come in and do a jam session, and we just uh, make that a fundraising vehicle on demand. You
I
know,
would love it. We would
and
love it.
maybe even around the music festival during Harlem Week and some other things that we're talking
Mhm.
about.
I would love it. I don't know if we have time. I do want to say one more thing
Mhm.
about the museum and the atmosphere in the museum. One of the things that I'm very proud of is as soon as I came on board, we immediately offered to jazz musicians the opportunity to come into the museum space and use it as a rehearsal space.
Oh,
We
yes, I
offered the
forgot. Yeah.
opportunity for artists to come in and use it as a showcase space. As long as they came in during business hours and weren't conflicting with the programming that we already had planned, we made that offer to them free of charge. And one of the things we are committed to is being an advocate for jazz artists and what I call jazz adjacent artists. So you don't necessarily have to be a musician. You can be a clothing designer. You can be a fine artist. We're doing a lot of stuff with Tyson Hall, who is Harlem based. We support jazz and we support the arts. I always say that I worship at the altar of creativity, and I take that very seriously. We do everything that we can think of to advocate for jazz artists, jazz adjacent artists to be a really essential part of Harlem and to create a Harlem-based home for artists and for jazz.
And you have done a wonderful job. And I can't, you pinned it. It's just such a striking. I know, from a culture, is it a cultural thing?
My pendant,
Yeah.
it's actually a pentagram.
Mm.
It's a pentagram. We can talk about that offline. I was thinking that you might think it's related to my tribal roots, but
Yeah.
it's not.
No.
No, 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 no.
Right.
It's a pentagram, but it's a big conversation piece. People always ask me about it.
For those who, and Tracy has educated me. We used to train together, and she was gave me so much information. When she say tribal, she's talking about the indigenous,
Yeah,
Americans who was part
yeah.
of her family, and she gave me. There's so many stories about that, which is that could be a whole other
That's
show.
another show because we're going to do the tribe. I'm a tribal member and on the tribal council of the Ramapo Lenape Indians, and we're going to do a land acknowledgement at the museum in the spring. So we'll let you know about that.
That's great,
When
because my family in South Carolina, they were Cherokee, which a lot of the Cherokee and the Seminoles were actually slaves anyway, you know,
Mhm.
and some
Yeah.
Indians that you had educated became black because it was easier to be black than it would be Indian, which
I
is
told you that story about my grandparents, right? But the other thing that I want to point out is the relationship to indigenous music. Jazz as indigenous music, we're going to be celebrating with Delbert Anderson, who is a Navajo jazz musician. So we've got all kinds of cool stuff. We can find, when I say jazz is everywhere, when you say jazz is everywhere, we mean it for real, right? So we're exploring every root of jazz we can find. And I should say that our program theme for this entire year and for next year as well is the roots and roots of jazz. ROOTS and ROUTES. So we're exploring every root and every root we can find.
Tracy. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Again, I will see you at some point in the 10th when you tell me where I need to be and when I need
That's
to be
right.
there.
Okay.
But
We'll take care
and
of
I
you.
will also make sure that I email you Craig Harris's information. I think he
Okay.
would be
Please do.
pleased, since his music was part of of the event. Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Jazz Museum in Harlem. If you haven't been, go to the site. It's a place that you need to talk to friends about and to support. And Tracy, as you know, I love you. You're my. I just can't believe it's been 2 years.
I know. I love you, and I
years.
miss you, Tony. I miss training. I miss being in your presence. I miss the calm that you offer me and the wisdom. I miss Harlem. I a lot, and I look forward to when we're all back in each other's company.
Soon come. Take care. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you soon. And
thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Matt.
And yeah, and Matt, of course, we'll talk. As a matter of fact, you, Matt, and I, Tracy, will have a conversation as to how we might be able to get some programming on Soul City as Soul City begins to develop. Matter of fact, probably by our next show. The next show is with Columbia University. The second Tuesday, we always have a special show with Columbia University talking about small businesses. And there may be a good, important Soul City announcement by the next show. And on the 15th, my guest is Vondi Curtis Hall, who's an actor. As a matter of fact, Kelsey Lemons, who's his wife, is an actor and director. And the Harriet Tubman story she did, and you'll know Vondi. He's done so much stuff. Another person used to train at the center, and he'll be my guest then. So we're doing a very interesting Black History Month series of shows. And again, please, next week, same time, same station, Tony Rogers, the Urbanology Show, Soul City. Take care, and we'll be seeing you soon. And thank you, Matt McCoy, Matt Man, for doing what you do best. See you next week. Take care. Bye.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.